What's up, this is Tariq. So pedal-based power meters are an awesome option if you ride multiple bikes or just want something easy to install and no messing around with bottom brackets, chain rings, or cranks. Just screw them in and you are good to go. And this is the Magene P715. This is the latest dual-sided power meter from Magene, and it comes in two versions, the P715K, which uses Lokio cleats, and the P715S, which is compatible with Shimano cleats. And both versions are priced at $500 US, which is super competitive for a true lift and ride dual-sided power meter. And I have been riding with these pedals for nearly 2 months now, indoors, outdoors, and across a bunch of workouts. And we've got a lot to talk about. Sorry, I'm not going to spoil anything. Just watch the full video and hopefully you sub to the channel. And okay, let's jump in. So the Magene P715 pedals comes in two different color options, black and silver. And the pair I have here is the black version. Out of the box, the pedals are packed nicely, and inside you will get the pedals along with two crank washers, a dual head magnetic charging cable, and a user manual. Installation is straightforward. You'll need an 8mm Allen wrench, and just like any standard pedals, you just screw them on and torque them to 30 to 40 Newton meters. So if you got a torque wrench, great. If not, just make sure they are really snug and secure. Once installed, give the pedals a quick spin to wake them up, then open the Magene utility app on your phone and connect to the pedals via Bluetooth. And the app will guide you through the activation process, which involves syncing the pedals and registering them to your account. After activation, make sure you set the correct crank length. This is very important for accurate measurement. If you are not sure what your crank length is, take a look at your crank arms. It's usually printed or engraved near the pedal threads. If you set the crank length through the Magene app, just double check that the same value is also set correctly on your bike computer after pairing. So I recommend doing a short spin and then performing a zero calibration, either through the app or directly from your bike computer. One small detail I really like about these pedals is how well balanced they are. They are designed so the body naturally hangs vertically in the right direction or the right position for clipping in rather than spinning out of control when you come out of a stop and try to clip in. It just makes it much easier to clip back in quickly when you start riding. The KU version comes in at 314 grams per specs and confirmed on my scale. That's without the washers. The Shimano version is just slightly heavier at 318 grams per spec sheet, and adding the washers will add another 3 grams or so. The Q factor is 55 millimeters. The stack height differs slightly between versions. It's 11 millimeter on the KU version and 13 millimeter for the Shimano version. In terms of connectivity, the P715 supports both Bluetooth and ANT+, so you can pair them with just about any bike computer or indoor training app. They also have an IPX7 waterproof rating, so they are fine for rainy days or sweat-drenched indoor sessions. And the battery life is rated 120 hours, and charging is done using a dual head magnetic USB cable, one connector for each pedal. I charged mine when I first got them, and after nearly 2 months of riding, there's still plenty of charge left. Power range tops out at 2500 watts, and they are designed to work in temperatures between -20 degrees Celsius to 50 degrees Celsius, or that's between 4 to 120 degrees Fahrenheit. So short of riding in Antarctica or the Sahara deserts, I think you are covered. As for data, the P715 measures and broadcasts a full suite of cycling dynamics, including power, cadence, lift and ride balance data, torque effectiveness, pedaling smoothness, power base and riding, power phase and riding position. You can view these on the Magene utility app or on any compatible head unit like the Garmin Edge. And speaking of the app, that's also where you activate the pedals. You can perform zero calibration, it tweaks some of the settings and apply firmware updates. Magene claims plus or minus 1% power accuracy with automatic calibration, which puts them right in line with top tier power meter that costs over $1,000. And when it comes to training with power, accuracy and consistency are everything. If your numbers are off, even just a little bit, it can throw off your training zones, TSS, and how you track your progress, especially if you are switching between bikes and devices. So to test the accuracy of these pedals, I put the P715 through a lot of riding and compared it to a lot of different power meters. So the first ride was on the Kicker Bike Pro, which I have reviewed before and know to be incredibly accurate. Looking at the data, both P715 and the Kicker Bike tracked almost identical throughout the ride. No lag, no spikes, no dropouts, and that's always a good first sign. Zooming into the main interval block, the average power was just 2 watts apart, so about 1% difference between the two. And zooming deeper into one of the 8-minute intervals, the Kicker read 263.72 watts and the P715 was at 263.15. So that is about as good as it gets. Even at lower intensities, around 100 watts, the P715 read 100.68 watts and the Kicker was at 103.29. So that's about 2.6% difference, which is totally fine in that lower power range where any small changes can make a big difference. On the next ride, I paired the P715 with the Wahoo Kicker V6, which has been rock solid for me when it comes to power accuracy. Right away, the power traces from both looked nearly identical. Average power for the full ride was 182.38 watts from the P715 and 108.28 watts from the Wahoo Kicker 6. So about 0.6% difference between the two, which is incredible. And let's zoom into the intervals. Same story. 205 watts here from the P715 and 204 from the Kicker. Another interval here was 218 versus 217. And the final interval of the ride showed 231 watts from the P715 and 231 watts from the Kicker. So that's basically just perfect. And for the next ride, I ran 3 power sources, the Magene P715, the P715, and the Kicker version 6. The average power for the ride was 186.5 watts on the P515 crank-based power meter and 189.9 watts on the P715 pedal power meter and 187.4 watts on the Wahoo Kicker 6. So a 3.4 watt spread, which works out to be around 1.8%. So zooming into one of the 12-minute intervals, the P515 came in at 232.4 watts. The P715 was at 235.3, and the Kicker read 233.2 watts. So the P715 came in just a bit higher here, but all within specs. Next, I wanted to see how the Magene P715 compares to the Power to Max NG power meter, which is another highly accurate dual-sided spider-based power meter. Looking at the data from this ride, the two tracked each other almost perfectly from start to finish. The average power for the entire ride was 190.5 watts from the P715 power meter and 190.9 watts from the Power to Max. So less than a half a watt difference between the two. But let's zoom in and take a look at the data a little closer. Again, same story. The P715 averaged 187 watts and the Power to Max measured 186 watts. Zooming into another section, we have 212.5 versus 212.4 watts. And even during this longer section, the difference was only about 1%. 216 watts versus 218 watts. So overall, the two lines were practically sitting on top of each other the whole time. No drift, no lag, and no weird spikes. Now, looking at the left and right power balance from both power meters were again really close. The Magene showed an average split of about 46 to 54, and power to max came in at about 49.51. So a tiny difference here, but that is completely normal when comparing a pedal-based system to a spider-based one, since they measure power at a slightly different points. Zooming in on shorter segments here, both left and right legs stayed very close, usually within just a few watts per leg, which is really good. When we move over to the mean max power curve, the two units are nearly identical across the board. The power to max showed slightly higher peaks in the first few seconds, 483 watts versus 424 watts at the 1 second mark. After that, the curves settle right on top of each other all the way through the longest or longer durations. Cadence data also looked great. The averages were nearly identical, about 87 RPM from both. And if you look closely at the graphs, both units tracked the same without any lags or dropouts. So overall, the P715 performed exceptionally well here. Average power, cadence, and balance all lined up beautifully with less than a 1% difference for most of the rides. Finally, I took the P715 outdoors for a real-world test. The ride started at around 46 degrees Fahrenheit and warmed up to about 70 by the end of the 3-hour ride. The average power from the ride from a 40,000-foot view was about 175 watts on the Magene P715 spider-based power meter and 174 on the P715 pedal power meter, so less than 1% difference here. But let's zoom in and take a closer look into individual sections. Again, we see both power meters stayed side by side on this last climb. Fortunately for me, I have to end every ride with a nasty climb. The P715 averaged about 292 watts and the P515 about 292 watts. So again, just really solid performance. And looking at the mean max power curve showed about 2 to 2.5% spread during short efforts in the 1 to 17 seconds range, which is great and nothing that raises any concerns. So after about 2 months of use, indoors and outdoors, comparing to the Kicker Bike Pro, Wahoo Kicker 6, Magene P715 crankcase power meter, and Power to Max and G power meter, the Magene P715 has held up really well across the board. It's proven to be accurate, consistent, and has performed well across structured workouts, longer indoors and outdoor rides. So at $500, you are getting a dual-sided power meter that is easy to install, broadcasts all the key data that you want, and proven to just works. So if you've been considering a dual-sided power meter, this one is easily one of the best I have tested and comes in at a very attractive price. And I'll keep riding it and report back if anything changes, but so far this power meter definitely earned a spot in my gear rotation. Also, I would love to hear from you, so please share your experience with this power meter, post them in the comments. So that's gonna do it for this one. If you've got any questions about the Magene P715, drop them in the comments. And if you find this video helpful, give it a thumbs up. And if you're still watching and have not subscribed yet, you know what to do. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.